The stars looked cold and distant as Captain Vextar studied the sensor readings on his command bridge. His yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction as he watched the small blip on his screen move slowly through space. The human cargo ship had been traveling the same route for 3 days now, and had no idea that 12 Zephyrian warships were following it through the darkness. Vextar's claws tapped against his command chair as he thought about how easy this would be. Humans were weak creatures who preferred trading to fighting. They built slow cargo ships and filled them with valuable goods that they moved between their scattered colonies. The Zephyrian Empire had been raiding human vessels for months now, and not once had they encountered any real resistance. The bridge of the Shadowclaw hummed with quiet activity as his crew prepared for the ambush. Lieutenant Kriax worked at the weapons console while Navigator Hextor plotted their attack formation. They had done this many times before with human ships, and it always ended the same way. The humans would surrender immediately and beg for their lives while the Zephyrians took everything valuable from their cargo holds. Far ahead of the alien fleet, the human ship called Lucky Strike moved through space at a steady pace. Her hull was old and scarred from countless cargo runs between the outer colonies. Solar panels jutted out from her sides like metal wings, and her single plasma cannon looked small and harmless. Anyone looking at her would see exactly what she appeared to be: a simple merchant vessel carrying farming equipment to some distant world. On the Lucky Strike's bridge, Commander Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the starfield through the main view screen. He was a tall man with dark hair and calm blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. His uniform looked like standard merchant crew clothing, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he was more than just a simple trader. Chief Engineer Lisa Kane sat at her console running diagnostics on what the ship's computer listed as cargo hold systems. She was a woman in her 30s with short red hair and quick fingers that moved across her controls with practiced ease. The readouts on her screen showed normal merchant ship operations, but if anyone looked closely, they might notice that some of her systems drew more power than they should. Communications Officer Ben Carter maintained his position at the radio station, keeping watch for any incoming signals. He was young with brown hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. The communication array above the ship looked standard, but hidden inside its metal housing were sensors and transmitters that no civilian vessel should possess. Dr. Patricia Wells worked quietly in what the ship's manifest called the medical bay. She was preparing equipment that looked like standard emergency medical supplies, but served a very different purpose. Her blonde hair was tied back as she made final adjustments to systems that would soon prove their worth. Tactical Officer Amy Rodriguez sat at what appeared to be a simple navigation console. She was a woman with black hair and steady hands who seemed completely relaxed, despite the approaching danger. Her console looked normal, but hidden beneath its surface were controls for weapons that could level entire cities. Morrison had been expecting the Zephyrian attack for days now. Intelligence reports had warned him that alien raiders were operating in this sector and targeting human cargo ships. The Lucky Strike had been sent here specifically to encounter these raiders and deal with them in a way that would send a clear message to anyone else who might consider attacking human vessels. The asteroid field of Kepler 442 stretched out ahead of them like a maze of floating rocks and debris. It was the perfect place for an ambush because the large asteroids would block long-range sensors and make it impossible for any nearby ships to detect what was happening. The Zephyrians had chosen their hunting ground well, but they had made one critical mistake in their planning. They had assumed that the Lucky Strike was exactly what she appeared to be. Morrison walked over to Kane's station and glanced at her readouts. Everything was ready and waiting for his command. The ship's true systems were hidden behind false bulkheads and disguised as innocent cargo handling equipment. Months of careful preparation had gone into making the Lucky Strike look like a helpless merchant vessel, while hiding her real capabilities. Carter turned in his chair and gave Morrison a slight nod. The Zephyrian fleet was closing in and would be in position to spring their trap within minutes. Their ships were moving in the standard raider formation designed to surround and intimidate a civilian vessel into immediate surrender. The aliens had studied human merchant ships carefully and knew exactly what to expect. They knew about human trade routes and cargo schedules. They knew that human traders preferred profit to fighting and would surrender rather than risk their lives defending their goods. They had raided dozens of real merchant ships, and the pattern was always the same. What they did not know was that the Human Defense Initiative had been watching their activities and had developed a response. The Ghost Ship program had been created specifically to deal with raiders who targeted civilian vessels. Military ships disguised as merchants would patrol the trade routes and wait for attacks that would allow them to strike back. Morrison returned to his command position and watched the tactical display as red dots appeared on the screen around them. 12 Zephyrian warships were moving into attack formation and would soon demand their surrender. The aliens believed they were about to capture another helpless human cargo ship and steal everything valuable from her holds. Rodriguez caught Morrison's eye and raised one eyebrow slightly. Her hand rested casually near her console, but she was ready to activate systems that would turn the Lucky Strike from prey into predator in seconds. The transformation would be complete and devastating. The moment was almost here. Soon the Zephyrians would learn that not every human ship was what it seemed to be. They would discover that humanity had been preparing for exactly this kind of encounter and had developed ways to turn their own tactics against them. In the depths of space, 12 alien warships closed in on what they believed was an easy target. They had no idea that they were about to face something that would change everything they thought they knew about humans and their capabilities in war. Captain Vextar smiled as his fleet moved into perfect attack formation around the human cargo ship. The Lucky Strike drifted helplessly between two massive asteroids, exactly where his intelligence reports had predicted she would be. Her energy signature showed nothing more threatening than basic life support systems and a single weak plasma cannon that looked like it had not been fired in years. The Shadow Claw and her 11 sister ships spread out in a wide circle around their target. Each Zephyrian vessel was 3 times larger than the human ship and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Their dark hulls gleamed with weapon ports and sensor arrays, while their engines glowed bright blue in the darkness of space. Lieutenant Kriak studied his targeting systems and shook his reptilian head in disappointment. The human ship showed no signs of advanced shielding or defensive systems. Her hull was old and patched with metal plates that looked like they had been welded on by amateur mechanics. Solar collectors hung from her sides like broken wings, and her communication array was so outdated that it probably could not even send a distress signal fast enough to matter. Navigator Hextor confirmed what they all already knew. The Lucky Strike was completely surrounded with no chance of escape. The asteroids blocked any retreat, while the Zephyrian ships controlled every possible exit route. This would be another easy victory for the Empire, and another example of human weakness for the rest of the galaxy to witness. Vextar activated his communication system and prepared to deliver the standard surrender demand. He had given this same speech to dozens of human captains, and they always responded the same way. First came denial, then fear, then desperate bargaining, and finally complete submission. Humans were predictable creatures who valued their lives more than their cargo or their pride. On the bridge of the Lucky Strike, Commander Morrison listened to the alien transmission with the calm expression of someone who had been expecting exactly this moment. The Zephyrian captain spoke in broken human language with a voice full of arrogance and contempt. He demanded immediate surrender and threatened destruction if his orders were not followed within 60 seconds. Morrison looked around at his crew and saw the same quiet readiness in all their faces. Kane continued working at her engineering console as if nothing unusual was happening. Carter monitored communication frequencies with professional attention to detail. Wells finished her preparations in the medical bay, while Rodriguez kept one hand near her tactical controls. None of them looked like frightened merchants facing certain death. They looked like soldiers waiting for orders. Morrison activated his own communication system and responded to the alien ultimatum. His voice carried exactly the right mixture of fear and resignation, as he identified himself as a simple cargo ship captain, carrying farming equipment to the outer colonies. He begged the aliens not to hurt his crew and promised to cooperate fully with their demands. The performance was perfect. Vexitar heard exactly what he expected to hear from a terrified human trader who knew he was completely outgunned and surrounded. The captain's voice shook with emotion as he asked for mercy, and promised that his cargo holds contained nothing but agricultural machinery and terraforming supplies. But there were details that did not quite match what Vextar had seen in previous encounters with human merchants. The crew on the Lucky Strike moved with too much coordination and discipline. Their positions on the bridge seemed more tactical than commercial. The way they responded to their captain's orders suggested military training rather than civilian experience. Lieutenant Kriax noticed something strange about the human ship's power distribution. Most merchant vessels would have shut down non-essential systems by now to conserve energy for life support. The Lucky Strike was running all her systems at normal levels as if power consumption was not a concern. Her reactor output seemed higher than what a ship her size should need for basic operations. Navigator Hextor studied the tactical display and frowned at what he saw. The human ship had positioned herself in the asteroid field with what looked like random chance, but her location actually provided some interesting defensive advantages. She could use the large rocks for cover, and her enemies would have to be careful about their firing angles to avoid hitting each other. The more Vextar studied the situation, the more he began to feel that something was not quite right. Intelligence. Reports had assured him that human merchants were easy targets who surrendered immediately when faced with overwhelming force. This crew seemed too calm and too organized for civilians who should be panicking in the face of certain death. Morrison continued his act as a frightened cargo ship captain while secretly monitoring his crew's preparations. Kane had powered up systems that were hidden so well that even close inspection would not reveal their true purpose. The Lucky Strike's real capabilities were concealed behind false bulkheads and disguised as innocent merchant equipment. Wells activated combat medical protocols that would be needed very soon. Her medical bay contained treatment systems for injuries that civilian merchants should never expect to encounter. Everything was designed to support military operations while maintaining the appearance of routine commercial activities. Rodriguez ran final checks on weapons systems that did not officially exist. Her navigation console was actually a tactical control station, capable of coordinating attacks that could level entire fleets. The Lucky Strike carried enough hidden firepower to destroy every ship in the Zephyrian formation. Carter prepared communication equipment that could broadcast on military frequencies across half the galaxy. When this encounter was over, the entire known universe would hear exactly what had happened to the aliens who had dared to attack a human vessel. The message would serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider humans to be easy prey. The 60-second deadline approached and Vextar prepared to accept the human surrender. He planned to board their ship and take everything valuable, while leaving the crew stranded in the asteroid field, as a lesson to other merchants about the price of traveling through Zephyrian space without paying proper tribute to the Empire. Morrison smiled slightly as he watched the countdown timer reach 0. The aliens had positioned themselves exactly where he wanted them. They were confident and unprepared for what was about to happen. In a few more seconds, they would learn that attacking human ships was the last mistake they would ever make. The 60 seconds expired and Captain Vexistar prepared to order his boarding parties to dock with the human vessel. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan, and the Lucky Strike would soon be another easy prize for the Zephyrian Empire. His soldiers were already moving toward their assault craft when something made him pause and take a closer look at his sensor readings. The human ship was still broadcasting surrender messages and begging for mercy, but there was something different about her energy signature now. Small fluctuations in her power systems suggested activity that did not match what a frightened merchant crew should be doing. Most civilian captains would be shutting down everything except life support to show their complete helplessness. Lieutenant Kriak suddenly looked up from his console with confusion written across his scaled features. The targeting computer was having difficulty getting a solid lock on the human vessel, even though she was sitting perfectly still between the asteroids. Something was interfering with their sensors in ways that should not be possible for a simple cargo ship. Navigator Hextor checked his instruments twice before reporting what he was seeing to his captain. The Lucky Strike's hull configuration seemed to be changing in subtle ways that made no sense for a merchant vessel. Metal plates were shifting position, and what had looked like damage from countless cargo runs was actually some kind of adaptive camouflage system. Morrison waited until he was certain that the alien boarding craft were committed to their approach, before giving the signal his crew had been waiting for. The time for deception was over, and the lucky strike was about to reveal her true nature to the galaxy. He looked at Rodriguez and nodded once. The transformation began instantly, and was more dramatic than anything the Zephyrians had ever witnessed. False hull plating slid away with mechanical precision to reveal weapon ports that had been completely hidden moments before. The Lucky Strike's true configuration emerged as stealth systems powered down, and her real design became visible for the first time. What had appeared to be a defenseless merchant vessel was actually one of the most advanced warships in human space. The USS Phantom had been disguised so perfectly that even close inspection had failed to reveal her military nature. Her adaptive hull plating had mimicked the appearance of an old cargo hauler while concealing weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Kane brought the ship's main reactor online, and power readings jumped to levels that made the Zephyrian sensors scream warnings across their bridge. The fusion plant hidden in the Phantom's core was designed to power weapon systems that the aliens had never encountered. Energy flowed through conduits that had been disguised as simple cargo handling equipment. Rodriguez activated tactical systems that transformed her navigation console into a weapons control station capable of coordinating attacks across multiple target zones. The Phantom carried plasma torpedoes that could phase through enemy shields and quantum disruptors that could tear apart matter at the atomic level. Her defensive systems included adaptive shielding that could adjust to any known weapon type. Wells completed activation of the electronic warfare suite that would turn the aliens' own systems against them. The medical bay contained computers, powerful enough to hack into enemy networks and reprogram their targeting systems. Within seconds, she would be able to make the Zephyrian ships fire on each other instead of their intended target. Carter powered up communication arrays that would broadcast this encounter across the entire known galaxy. The message would reach every species within 50 light years and serve as a warning about what happened to those who attacked human vessels. The age of treating humans as easy prey was about to end forever. The Phantom's true shape was sleek and predatory, with weapon systems that seemed to grow from her hull like mechanical claws. Her engines glowed with contained fusion fire, while her shields shimmered with energy fields that could deflect anything the Zephyrians might throw at her. She was a hunter that had been disguised as harmless prey. Captain Vextar stared in complete shock as his sensors registered the impossible transformation taking place before his eyes. The targeting computer was identifying weapon systems that should not exist on any civilian vessel. Energy readings showed a military fusion reactor with enough output to power a battlecruiser. The ship's hull was reconfiguring itself into an attack formation. The Shadow Claw's bridge erupted in chaos as officers tried to understand what they were seeing. Lieutenant Kriak shouted warnings about massive weapon signatures, while Navigator Hextor reported that their tactical formation was now completely wrong for engaging a military target. They had positioned themselves to intimidate a merchant ship, not fight an advanced destroyer. Morrison's voice came across all communication frequencies, and his tone was completely different now. The fear and resignation were gone, replaced by cold military professionalism that sent chills through every alien who heard it. He identified himself as Commander Morrison of the Terran Defense Force and explained that the Zephyrians had just made the worst mistake of their lives. The Lucky Strike had never been a merchant vessel at all. She was the USS Phantom operating under deep cover as part of humanity's ghost ship program. Her mission was to locate and eliminate threats to human commerce, while demonstrating that attacking civilian vessels would result in swift and devastating retaliation. Rodriguez brought weapons online and targeting systems locked onto every Zephyrian ship simultaneously. The Phantom could engage multiple targets with precision that would have been impossible for the aliens to imagine. Her computers calculated firing solutions that would maximize damage while minimizing the chance of any enemy vessel escaping to report what they had witnessed. The Zephyrian Empire had based their entire strategy on the belief that humans were weak traitors who would surrender rather than fight. They had conducted months of successful raids against real merchant ships and grown confident that no human vessel posed any real threat to their operations. Intelligence reports had assured them that humans preferred profit to warfare. They were about to learn that intelligence reports could be wrong, and that humanity had been preparing for exactly this kind of encounter. The Ghost Ship program had been designed to turn the aliens' own tactics against them, and demonstrate that human space was protected by forces they could not see or predict. Morrison gave his final warning to the alien fleet before ordering his crew to show the galaxy why attacking human ships was the last mistake anyone would ever make. The battle began with a flash of brilliant light as Rodriguez fired the Phantom's first salvo of quantum torpedoes. The weapons moved through space like streaks of pure energy and passed through the Zephyrian shields as if they did not exist at all. The torpedoes were designed to phase shift at the moment of impact and detonate inside the target's hull, where no defensive system could stop them. Two Zephyrian cruisers simply vanished in explosions of white fire that turned their hulls into expanding clouds of superheated gas and metal fragments. Captain Vextar watched in horror as ships that had been there one moment were completely gone the next. His sensors could not even detect debris from the destroyed vessels, because the quantum weapons had reduced them to their basic atomic particles. Lieutenant Kriax frantically worked his weapons console trying to target the human ship, but the Phantom was no longer where his sensors said she should be. Morrison had ordered Kane to transfer all power from the stealth systems to engines and shields. The human vessel moved through space with impossible speed and grace while Zephyrian targeting computers struggled to track something that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The Phantom danced between enemy weapons fire like a deadly ghost that could not be touched. Her adaptive shielding absorbed the few shots that managed to connect, while her hull plating shifted color and texture to confuse optical targeting systems. She was a predator, designed to hunt in the darkness between stars while her prey fumbled, blindly trying to land a killing blow. Navigator Hextor screamed warnings as three more Zephyrian ships fell victim to the human weapons. The quantum disruptors tore through their hulls at the molecular level, while plasma torpedoes melted armor plating that should have been able to withstand direct hits from small asteroids. Nothing in their arsenal seemed capable of stopping the human attack. Wells activated the electronic warfare systems and began her assault on the alien computer networks. The Zephyrian ships used interconnected tactical systems that allowed them to coordinate their attacks and share targeting information. This connectivity was designed to be their greatest strength, but Wells turned it into a fatal weakness within seconds. Virus programs flowed through the alien networks like digital poison and began rewriting command codes at the most basic levels. Zephyrian targeting computers suddenly identified their own ships as enemy vessels, while navigation systems began plotting collision courses with nearby asteroids. The aliens found themselves fighting their own equipment as much as the human destroyer. Two more enemy vessels collided with each other when their navigation systems failed simultaneously. The impact cracked both hulls and sent them spinning into the asteroid field where they broke apart against the massive rocks. Another ship fired its main guns at what its computer insisted was a human target, but actually hit its own flagship's shield generators. The Shadow Claw shuddered under friendly fire from her own escort vessels while Vextar tried desperately to regain control of the battle. His fleet was falling apart faster than he could give orders, and the human ship continued to move through his formation like an unstoppable force of destruction. Every weapon he fired seemed to miss, while every human shot found its target with deadly precision. Carter had been monitoring alien communications since the battle began, and he could hear the panic in their voices as they realized they were completely outmatched. Zephyrian officers shouted contradictory orders while their captains begged for reinforcements that would never arrive. The Empire's finest fleet was being systematically destroyed by a single human vessel. Morrison watched the tactical display as red dots representing enemy ships continued to disappear from his screen. The Phantom's computer calculated that the battle would be over within 8 more minutes at the current rate of destruction. Not one of his crew had been injured while the Zephyrian fleet was being reduced to cosmic debris. Kane redirected power to the main weapons as Rodriguez prepared for the final phase of the engagement. The remaining alien ships were trying to form a defensive formation, but their damaged systems made coordination impossible. Half of their vessels were firing at shadows while the other half couldn't tell friend from foe. The Phantom struck again, with a concentrated barrage that targeted the enemy command ship's vital systems. Quantum torpedoes phased through the shadow claws, shields and detonated in her engine room, while disruptor beams carved through her weapon ports. The flagship's main reactor went critical and filled the bridge with alarms that no one could silence. Vexatar felt his ship dying around him as bulkheads buckled and atmosphere began venting into space. His crew was abandoning their posts and running for the escape pods while fires spread through corridors that had been breached by human weapons. The pride of the Zephyrian Navy was falling apart like a toy that had been stepped on by a giant. Wells completed her electronic assault by uploading a final virus that would broadcast surrender messages from every remaining alien ship. The Zephyrian vessels began transmitting their own destruction as they begged for mercy that would not be granted. Their tactical networks collapsed entirely and left each ship fighting alone against an enemy they could not see or understand. Rodriguez fired, the last salvo that ended the Battle of Kepler 442, as historians would later call it. The remaining Zephyrian ships exploded one by one in brilliant flashes of light that illuminated the asteroid field like fireworks. Metal fragments bounced off the massive rocks while expanding gas clouds slowly dispersed into the vacuum of space. In less than 10 minutes, 12 warships of the Zephyrian Empire had been reduced to scrap metal and atomic particles. The aliens, who had expected an easy victory over helpless human merchants, had instead encountered military technology that was centuries beyond anything they possessed. Their superior numbers and heavy weapons had meant nothing against human tactics and engineering. Morrison looked around his bridge at crew members who had just won the most one-sided victory in recorded galactic history. Not a single system on the Phantom had been damaged, and no human lives had been lost. The Ghost ship had performed exactly as designed and sent a message that would echo across known space for generations to come. The silence after the battle was broken only by the sound of debris hitting the asteroid field, as pieces of destroyed Zephyrian warships drifted through space like metal snow. Commander Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Phantom and watched. The tactical display showed nothing but empty space where 12 enemy vessels had been floating just minutes before. The ambush that was supposed to capture a helpless human cargo ship had instead resulted in the complete destruction of an entire alien battle fleet. Carter worked at his communication station preparing to broadcast a message that would reach every listening post and relay station within 50 light years of their position. The recording equipment captured every detail of what had just happened, including the tactical data that showed how quickly and completely the Zephyrian ships had been eliminated. This information would spread through the galaxy faster than the fastest ship could travel. Morrison activated the wideband transmitter and began speaking in a calm, professional voice that carried the authority of someone who had just proven that humanity was not the weak species that most aliens believed them to be. He identified himself as Commander Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force and explained that the Lucky Strike had never been a merchant vessel at all, but rather a military ship operating under deep cover. The camera system recorded Morrison as he stood on his bridge with his crew working quietly at their stations behind him. These were not frightened traders who had gotten lucky in a fight against superior numbers. They were professional soldiers who had planned and executed a perfect military operation designed to send a message that would be heard across known space. Morrison gestured toward the main view screen that showed the debris field where the Zephyrian fleet had been destroyed. He explained that the aliens had made the mistake of believing intelligence reports that described humans as peaceful merchants who would surrender rather than fight. Those reports had been deliberately created to hide humanity's true military capabilities from potential enemies. The Phantom had been one of dozens of ghost ships operating throughout human space disguised as civilian vessels while actually carrying enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The program had been created specifically to deal with raiders and pirates who targeted what they believed were defenseless cargo ships. Today had been the first time that a ghost ship had encountered a major alien military force. Kane powered down the combat systems and began the process of returning the ship to her merchant vessel disguise. The false hull plating slid back into position while weapon ports closed, and the adaptive camouflage system made the Phantom look like the old cargo hauler Lucky Strike once again. Within minutes, no casual observer would suspect that she was anything other than what she appeared to be. Wells completed her final electronic warfare tasks by uploading virus programs into the wreckage of the alien ships. Any attempt to recover data from the destroyed vessels would trigger additional programs designed to erase evidence of human technology while broadcasting more surrender messages. The Zephyrian Empire would learn about their defeat, but they would not discover exactly how it had been accomplished. Rodriguez secured the weapon systems and returned her console to navigation mode, while Carter prepared multiple copies of the battle recording for transmission to every major communication hub. In this sector of the galaxy, the message would be broadcast on civilian frequencies as well as military channels to ensure that both governments and private organizations received the warning. Morrison continued his recorded message by explaining that humanity did not seek war with any species but would not tolerate attacks on human vessels or colonies. The destruction of the Zephyrian fleet was not an act of aggression, but rather a defensive response to an unprovoked assault on what the aliens believed was a civilian cargo ship carrying farming equipment to the outer colonies. The recording included tactical analysis that showed exactly how the human weapons had penetrated Zephyrian shields and armor. The quantum torpedoes had phased through defensive systems that should have been able to stop conventional weapons, while the disruptor beams had torn through hull plating at the molecular level. No known defense could stop these weapons once they were fired. Carter began transmitting the message to communication relays throughout the local star systems. Within hours, every major government and military organization would know that humanity possessed technology far beyond what they had previously demonstrated. The myth of human weakness would be replaced by a reputation for devastating military capability. Morrison addressed the recording directly to any species that might be considering attacks on human vessels. He warned that the Ghost Ship program had placed military vessels disguised as merchants throughout human space, and that any attempt to raid civilian shipping would result in the same fate that had befallen the Zephyrian fleet. Humanity would defend itself with overwhelming force. The message also contained an offer of peaceful cooperation with any species that respected human sovereignty and treated human vessels with appropriate diplomatic courtesy. Morrison emphasized that humanity preferred trade and exploration to warfare, but was fully prepared to defend itself against any threat. The choice of peace or war would be left to the other species of the galaxy. Wells activated a final transmission that would be broadcast continuously from automated beacons throughout the asteroid field. Any ship that entered this system would receive detailed information about what had happened here, including tactical recordings that showed the complete destruction of 12 alien warships by a single human vessel. The battle site would become a monument to human military capability. The USS Phantom completed her transformation back into the Lucky Strike and resumed course toward the outer colonies as if nothing had happened. Her cargo holds still contained the farming equipment listed in her manifest while her crew returned to their cover identities as civilian merchants. The Ghost Ship would continue her mission until called upon to defend humanity once again. Within days, the recording of Morrison's message had reached every major civilization in the galaxy. Some species dismissed it as propaganda, while others began immediate reviews of their threat assessments regarding human capabilities. The Zephyrian Empire never recovered from the loss of their elite fleet and abandoned all plans for further raids on human shipping. More importantly, the galaxy learned that humanity was not the weak species that intelligence reports had suggested. Human ships were no longer considered easy targets, and the Ghost Ship program expanded to include more military vessels operating under civilian disguises. The reputation for strength that humanity gained from the Battle of Kepler 442 protected human lives and commerce for generations to come.
The council chamber stretched wide and tall like a cathedral built for giants. 7 species sat in their designated sections, each area designed for their unique biology. The Vaxans occupied the eastern wing with their scaled bodies, reflecting the station's artificial light. The Zenthari buzzed quietly in their hive cluster formation to the north. 5 other species filled the remaining spaces, all of them ancient civilizations who had traveled the stars for thousands of years. Daniel Brooks stood at the human podium, small compared to most delegates present. He wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps with its single blue stripe, indicating his rank as liaison officer. His dark hair was cut military short, and his brown eyes scanned the room with careful attention. He had been on Harmony Prime Station for only 3 weeks, still learning the complex politics of galactic society. Today was his first major council session, and he could feel the weight of Earth's reputation resting on his shoulders. Ambassador Krelix rose from the Vaxon section. His species stood nearly 8 feet tall with muscular frames covered in deep green scales. His yellow eyes gleamed with confidence as he addressed the assembly. The Vaxon's voice rumbled through the translation devices everyone wore. He spoke about territory and expansion, about the natural order of strong species guiding weaker ones. His words were wrapped in diplomatic language, but the message was clear. The Vaxon Empire wanted to expand into the buffer zone between their space and human colonies. High Chancellor Vorn clicked his mandibles together in the Zenthari gesture for recognition. The insectoid leader stood on 4 legs with 2 others folded across his thorax. His compound eyes reflected rainbow patterns as he turned his head toward Krelix. He asked about the species currently inhabiting the buffer zone, about their rights and the Council's obligation to protect smaller civilizations. His voice carried the buzzing undertone common to his kind. Krelix waved one clawed hand dismissively. He argued that humanity was too new to space travel, too primitive to hold valuable territory. He mentioned that humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 4 decades ago. He suggested that Earth should be grateful the Vaxons were offering protection at all. He proposed that 3 human colony worlds should be ceded to Vaxon control as a gesture of goodwill and recognition of the natural hierarchy. His final statement dripped with contempt. He called Earth's military barely capable of defending a single star system, and humans themselves a species of barely civilized apes who had no business claiming multiple worlds. The council chamber filled with various sounds. Some species chittered in what might have been amusement. Others remained silent, watching to see how the human would respond. Daniel felt anger rising in his chest but kept his face neutral. He had been warned about Vaxon arrogance during his briefing. Earth's diplomatic training emphasized calm responses and measured words. He took a slow breath and stepped forward to the speaking platform. His voice came out steady and cold. He thanked the ambassador for his candor. He noted that honesty, even when insulting, was preferable to hidden intentions. He addressed the council as a whole, explaining that humanity had no interest in the Vaxon's proposed arrangement. Then he turned to face Krelix directly. His next words would be remembered across the galaxy for decades to come. He told the ambassador with all due respect that he did not want Earth's attention. He suggested that the Vaxon Empire should walk away from human borders and everyone could remain friends. The chamber erupted. Several species made sounds that the translators identified as laughter. The Vaxon delegation stood as one, their scales bristling with indignation. Krelix's eyes narrowed to slits. He demanded to know what threat a species of primitives could possibly pose to an empire spanning 200 star systems. He asked what weapons Earth possessed that could frighten civilizations who had mastered space travel while humans still lived in caves. His voice rose with each question, filling the chamber with contemptuous challenge. Daniel remained calm. He began speaking in the measured tone of someone explaining basic facts. He told them about Earth, about the planet where humans evolved. He described a world where almost everything was designed to kill them. He talked about predators and diseases, about weather patterns that could wipe out entire regions, about the constant struggle for resources. He explained that humans were persistence hunters who could track prey for days without stopping. He mentioned that human endurance was unusual among sentient species, that they could run until their prey simply collapsed from exhaustion. Then he moved to human history. He spoke of 10,000 years of warfare. He mentioned conflicts over territory, resources, religion, and ideology. He described weapons development that accelerated with each generation. He told them about the world wars, about industrial-scale killing that claimed tens of millions of lives. He explained about nuclear weapons, about the moment when humans created devices capable of destroying their own planet multiple times over. He noted that all of this happened before humanity ever left Earth's surface. His voice dropped lower. He told them that humans had turned their most destructive impulses into tools. He said that every tactical doctrine in Earth's military was written in human blood, learned from fighting themselves. He explained that humans unified their governments not because they became peaceful, but because they became efficient enough at killing each other that continued conflict meant extinction. He said that humanity chose to direct their violent nature outward, into protecting what they built rather than destroying it. The laughter had stopped. Several delegates shifted in their seats. High Chancellor Vorn leaned forward with his antennae twitching in obvious interest. Other species whispered among themselves through their various communication methods. But Krelliix stood unmoved. He declared it all bluffing. He said that tales of past violence meant nothing against modern military technology. He announced that the Vaxan Empire would conduct military exercises near human colonies within the week. He stated it was their right as a superior civilization. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. He recognized the feeling from Earth's history lessons, from the moments before wars began when diplomacy failed and pride overruled wisdom. He tried one more time. He told Krelliix plainly that this was a mistake. He warned that provoking humanity would reveal capabilities Earth had preferred to keep quiet. He said that being underestimated was often an advantage, and the Vaxans were about to remove that advantage. The Vaxan ambassador laughed. He called Daniel's warnings the desperate threats of a weak species. The session ended with formal votes that meant nothing. The council's bureaucracy moved slowly, while the Vaxan military moved fast. Daniel walked back to his quarters feeling the weight of failure. He sat at his desk and composed an encrypted message to Earth. His fingers moved across the holographic keyboard, spelling out 3 simple words. They did not listen. He sent the message and sat back in his chair. Through the window, he could see stars scattered across the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, human colonies prepared for conflict. On Earth, military commanders would read his message and begin preparations. The galaxy was about to learn something it should have understood from Daniel's warning. Humans did not make idle threats. They made promises, and when pushed, they kept those promises with brutal efficiency. Daniel closed his eyes and thought about the Vaxan fleet mobilizing toward human space. He thought about the colonists who would be threatened, the families who lived peaceful lives on distant worlds. He thought about the response Earth would unleash when those civilians came under threat. Ambassador Krelliix had been given multiple chances to walk away. He chose pride over wisdom. Soon he would learn the cost of that choice. Soon the entire galaxy would learn what humans meant when they said, "You do not want our attention." The alarm system screamed across New Haven Colony at 4 in the morning local time. Governor Helen Price was already awake, standing in the command center, wearing her service uniform from 30 years of military experience. Her gray hair was pulled back tight and her weathered face showed no emotion as she watched the tactical display. 30 red dots appeared at the edge of the star system, each one representing a Vaxan warship entering their space. The communications officer turned toward her with wide eyes. He reported that the Vaxan fleet was broadcasting their presence as routine military exercises. Helen snorted at the obvious lie. She had commanded defensive positions during the border conflicts before retirement. She knew the difference between exercises and invasion formations. These ships were arranged in attack clusters with their weapons powered and shields raised. She ordered immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel and activation of all defense platforms. Her second-in-command asked about military support from Earth. Helen checked the tactical computer and felt her stomach tighten. The nearest Earth vessels were 2 full days away at maximum speed. She sent the priority distress call anyway, knowing that help would arrive too late if the Vaxans decided to attack immediately. She ordered her military teams to defensive positions and hoped the colony's shields would hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Deep in space between New Haven and Earth, Captain Paul Wright received the distress signal aboard the UES Defiant. His ship was new, one of Earth's latest deep space vessels equipped with technology the galaxy had not seen yet. He was a tall man with sandy hair and sharp blue eyes that had seen combat during the corporate wars in the outer colonies. He read the message twice before calling his senior officers to the bridge. His chief engineer protested when Paul ordered maximum speed beyond safety limits. She argued that pushing the engines that hard could cause permanent damage. Paul cut her off with a simple statement. 4,700 colonists on New Haven needed help, and they would get there in 18 hours instead of 2 days, or the engineer could explain to those civilians why mechanical concerns mattered more than their lives. The engineer's face went hard, and she nodded once before returning to her station. Within minutes, the Defiant's engines burned hotter than design specifications allowed. On Harmony Prime Station, Daniel Brooks moved through bureaucratic procedures with growing frustration. He filed emergency session requests that required approval from multiple departments. He submitted evidence of Vaxxon aggression that needed review by council committees. Each step took hours, while the Vaxxon fleet moved closer to New Haven. High Chancellor Vorn met him privately in a side chamber, his insectoid features unreadable. He explained that council procedures existed for good reasons. He said that rushing to judgment could create diplomatic incidents. Daniel asked what kind of incident might occur if 30 warships attacked a civilian colony. Vorn's antennae drooped slightly, but he had no answer that satisfied anyone. Back at New Haven, the Vaxxon fleet completed their positioning. War Master Draxel commanded the force from his flagship. He was a massive specimen even among his species, covered in dark red scales with scars from a dozen campaigns. His yellow eyes gleamed as he studied the human colony on his tactical display. He saw weak defenses and a small population. He saw an opportunity to teach these primitive apes about their place in the galactic order. He opened a wideband transmission. His voice boomed across every frequency, translated automatically by communication systems. He announced that New Haven Colony was now under Vaxxon authority. He demanded immediate surrender and complete evacuation of all human personnel within 12 hours. He stated that resistance would be met with overwhelming force. He said the Vaxxon Empire was claiming this system for strategic purposes, and the Council would accept this as a legal occupation of disputed territory. Governor Price listened to the entire transmission before responding. Her voice came back cold and level. She thanked the War Master for his clear statement of intentions. She said it would be useful evidence for the War Crimes Tribunal. She offered him a counterproposal. His fleet could leave within 1 hour, and this incident would be recorded as a misunderstanding. After 1 hour, any Vaxxon ships remaining in the system would be considered hostile forces engaged in unprovoked aggression. She recommended he think carefully about his next action. Draxel laughed. The sound translated through speakers as a deep, rumbling growl. He called the governor's threat amusing. He said humans clearly did not understand military reality. He ordered his gunnery crews to disable the colony's main communication array as a demonstration of Vaxxon superiority. His weapons officer protested that a civilian mining station was in the firing line. Draxel waved off the concern. Casualties would make the message clearer. The blast lit up space like a brief star. The mining station's shields lasted less than 3 seconds against military-grade weapons. The structure broke apart in silence, scattering debris and bodies into the void. 47 people died in an instant, their last moments spent in terror and confusion. The communication array survived, but the message was clear. The Vaxxons were willing to kill civilians. On New Haven's command center, every screen showed the explosion. Helen Price stood frozen for one long moment. Around her, Officers went pale or wept or shouted in rage. She felt something ancient wake up inside her chest, something from humanity's long, violent history. She had seen soldiers die in combat. That was war, and soldiers understood the risks. But these were miners, technicians, families working in what should have been safe space. The Vaxons had just committed the one act that turned human restraint into fury. She walked to the main communications station with measured steps. She composed a message to Earth with hands that did not shake, despite the rage burning through her veins. The message was brief. They drew first blood. She sent it with Earth's highest military priority code. Then she turned to her defense coordinator and spoke words that every human military officer understood. No quarter. If they want war, we give them war. On Earth, in the underground military command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Richard Stone read the message. He was an older man with white hair and dark skin, lined from years of commanding fleets. He had fought in 3 major conflicts and retired twice, only to be called back to service. He stood and walked to the main strategic display showing human space and the surrounding systems. Other officers gathered around him, their faces grim. The debate was brief. Some argued for measured response. Others demanded immediate retaliation. Stone listened to all of them before speaking. He talked about why Earth unified its governments after the Third World War. He reminded them of the doctrine humanity adopted when they realized they needed to survive themselves before facing the galaxy. Humans had agreed to be peaceful when possible and absolutely brutal when necessary. The Vaxons killed civilians. They needed to learn what happened when humanity stopped pretending to be civilized. His orders went out through encrypted channels to every military installation on Earth and throughout human space. Release the full fleet. Activate Protocol Reaper. The messages were simple, but their meaning was clear. Earth was going to war, and they would do it with every weapon and ship they possessed. The galaxy was about to see what humans really built during their 40 years of space travel. Daniel Brooks sat in his quarters trying to reach Krellix through private channels. The Vaxon ambassador refused all messages. Daniel tried messaging other Vaxon officials, tried calling in favors with neutral species, tried everything he could think of to stop what was coming. Finally, he recorded one last message and sent it directly to Vaxon High Command. He explained that they had 6 hours before learning why Earth unified under a single government. He said humans did not fight to win territory or resources. They fought until nothing capable of threatening them remained standing. The message was received and dismissed. Vaxon military doctrine did not include retreat from inferior opponents. They had fought dozens of species over the centuries. They had won every major conflict. These humans would be no different. The UES Defiant arrived at New Haven with its engines glowing red from overheating. Captain Paul Wright took one look at the debris field where the mining station died and felt his jaw clench. His tactical officer identified the Vaxon fleet's position. Paul ordered battle stations and moved his ship between the colony and the enemy. He opened communications to War Master Draxel. His message was simple. You have one chance to withdraw. After that, no quarter will be given. Draxel's response came back filled with amusement. He asked what one human ship could do against his entire fleet. Paul's answer was cold. You are about to find out. Draxel laughed and ordered all 30 ships to target the Defiant. Every weapon system locked on, every crew prepared to fire. The War Master gave the command and space erupted with energy. The Vaxon fleet fired as one. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles converged on the UES Defiant from 30 different angles. The amount of destructive power thrown at Paul Wright's ship should have vaporized it instantly. War Master Draxel watched his tactical display, expecting to see the human vessel disappear in a ball of fire. Instead, the Defiant's shields flared bright blue and absorbed everything. When the light faded, the human ship remained intact and its weapons were charging. Paul stood on his bridge with his hands gripped behind his back. His tactical officer called out damage reports that showed minimal shield depletion. His weapons officer requested permission to return fire. Paul gave it with a single word. The Defiant's railguns spoke with magnetic acceleration. 3 Vaxxon cruisers took direct hits before their crews even realized the human ship was shooting back. The kinetic rounds punched through their shields like paper and tore through their hulls. 2 of the ships went dark immediately. The third spun out of control with atmosphere venting from a dozen breaches. Draxel stared at his display in disbelief. His scales bristled, and his claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. He screamed orders at his fleet to reform and concentrate fire. His crews scrambled to adjust their tactics. They launched another volley, this time with double the missile spread and coordinated beam strikes. The Defiant twisted through space with acceleration that should have crushed its crew. Its point defense systems came alive with streams of projectiles that intercepted 98% of incoming missiles. The few that got through detonated against shields that barely flickered. Then the space around New Haven began to tear. Not in one location, but hundreds of them simultaneously. Slip space portals opened like flowers blooming across the darkness. Ships emerged from faster-than-light travel with precision timing. First came destroyers and frigates moving in perfect formation, then cruisers and heavy battleships. Finally, the carriers arrived, massive vessels bristling with fighter craft and weapon systems. The UES Defiant was suddenly surrounded by Allied forces. 800 Earth Defense Force ships materialized in the span of 3 minutes. On the Vaxxon flagship, officers froze at their stations. Draxel felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service. Fear. His 30 ships were suddenly outnumbered 27-1. But it was not just the numbers. The human fleet moved with coordinated precision that spoke of decades of tactical development. Their formations were textbook perfect. Their positioning covered every possible escape vector. They had appeared exactly where they needed to be to trap his entire force. A transmission came through on all frequencies. Fleet Admiral John Carter spoke from his command ship with a voice like iron. He identified himself and his fleet. He stated that the Vaxxons had killed 47 human civilians. He noted they had fired on a military vessel. He reminded them they had been offered multiple opportunities to withdraw. He said the Vaxxon Empire had chosen war. Now Earth would teach them why that was a mistake. His final words carried no emotion, just simple fact. You wanted to see what humans can do. Watch carefully. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration of military superiority so complete that later historians would struggle to classify it. The human fleet attacked with methodical efficiency. Their railguns fired rounds that moved faster than Vaxxon sensors could track. The projectiles hit with kinetic energy that made shields useless. Vaxxon armor crumpled like foil. Energy weapons designed to cut through reinforced hulls met adaptive shielding that learned and adjusted in real time. After the first few salvos, human shields were already optimized against Vaxxon weapon frequencies. But the most terrifying aspect was the cyber warfare. Human artificial intelligence systems infiltrated Vaxxon ship networks within minutes. 17 vessels suddenly went dark as their computer systems locked out their own crews. Navigation failed, weapons powered down, life support switched to minimal. The ships became floating coffins while their crews panicked in darkness. Emergency systems refused to activate. Manual overrides did not respond. The humans had taken control without firing a shot at those vessels. Sub-Commander Trixall served on one of the cruisers that still had functioning systems. She was young for her rank, promoted quickly due to skill rather than connections. She watched through her view screen as human ships systematically dismantled the Vaxxon fleet. A destroyer tried to make a run for the system's edge. 3 human frigates pursued it with casual ease. Their missiles were faster and smarter, adjusting course mid-flight to track evasive maneuvers. The destroyer died before it traveled 1,000 kilometers. Another cruiser attempted to fight back with everything it had. Human point defense intercepted every shot while return fire crippled the cruiser's engines. The vessel went adrift, helpless. Trixal sent a desperate message to Vaxen High Command. Her hands shook as she typed. She reported that the human fleet was not trying to win. They were making an example. She said this was not military engagement but extermination. She begged for orders, for reinforcements, for anything. The response came back 3 hours later after the battle was already over. Stand down and await terms. Draxel tried to organize a retreat, but human ships covered every escape route. He attempted to rally his remaining forces for a coordinated assault. The humans responded by targeting his flagship's engines specifically. Precision strikes from 3 different ships hit simultaneously. His vessel's main power failed. Backup systems engaged, but the damage was catastrophic. The War Master found himself commanding a crippled ship in the middle of overwhelming enemy forces. On Harmony Prime Station, the Galactic Council's emergency session finally convened. Observer Quallen was a Zenthari military analyst assigned to document conflicts for the Council's historical records. He patched live telemetry from New Haven into the Council chambers. Every delegate watched in silence as human military doctrine revealed itself. They saw tactics honed over centuries of human warfare. They saw technology developed during a species' violent adolescence. They saw coordination that came from fighting themselves for thousands of years. High Chancellor Vorn turned to Ambassador Krelix, who sat in his designated area looking pale. The scales on his face had lost their usual vibrant color. Vorn's translated voice carried a mixture of shock and accusation. He asked if Krelix had known about human military capabilities. The Vaxan ambassador had no answer. He had dismissed intelligence reports as exaggeration. He had assumed a young spacefaring species could not possibly match empires with millennia of experience. His arrogance had led to this. Daniel Brooks stood and addressed the council. His voice carried an edge that had not been there before. He explained that humanity had not hidden their capabilities, but simply had not been provoked enough to display them. He said every weapon system they were watching had been developed during Earth's own wars. He reminded them that he had warned Ambassador Krelix explicitly. He repeated the words that now carried terrible weight. You do not want Earth's attention. The council had laughed then. No one was laughing now. The battle ended within 2 hours. Of 30 Vaxan ships, 22 were destroyed or disabled beyond repair. 3 were captured intact with their crews taken prisoner. 5 were allowed to escape. Those 5 were deliberately spared and given safe passage out of the system. Fleet Admiral Carter made sure they understood. They were messengers. They would return home and report what happened. The Vaxan Empire needed to know exactly what Earth could do when provoked. Carter broadcast one more transmission. This time it went directly to Vaxan Prime, to the Imperial Palace itself. He identified himself and his authority. He stated the facts without embellishment. Earth had eliminated the Vaxan border fleet in response to the murder of 47 civilians. This was their only warning. Any further aggression toward human space or their allies would be met with escalation. Human forces would enter Vaxan home systems. They would dismantle the Vaxan war machine completely. They would ensure the Empire never threatened peaceful beings again. The choice was Vaxan leadership's to make, but they needed to choose wisely. On New Haven, Governor Helen Price stood in the command center watching the debris field where the Vaxan fleet had gathered. Dr. Amy Walsh worked in the medical bay treating the few injuries sustained during the brief exchange. The doctor had moved to New Haven 5 years ago seeking peaceful work after a career in military medicine. Now she was back to treating trauma and shock. She asked Helen if such brutal response was necessary. The governor's answer came hard. The Vaxans chose to learn the hard way. They thought humans were weak. Now they know different. Amy pressed the question. She asked about proportional response, about the scale of destruction. Helen turned to face her. The governor's eyes showed no regret. She explained that humans learned a terrible lesson during their world wars. Peace only exists when the cost of war becomes unthinkable. The Vaxans needed to understand that attacking humans carried consequences too severe to risk. Now the galaxy knows that lesson too. She said it with certainty. Earth would rather be feared and left alone than underestimated and constantly challenged. Captain Paul Wright received orders to remain at New Haven for security while the main fleet dispersed to patrol routes. His crew celebrated their victory, but he felt no joy in it. He had seen the Vaxan ships break apart. He had watched escape pods fleeing dying vessels. War was war, but he took no pleasure in killing. He hoped the message was clear enough that this would not need to happen again. The 5 Vaxan ships that escaped jumped to faster than light speed, carrying their terrible news home. On board, crews processed what they had witnessed. They had entered the system confident in their superiority. They left broken and terrified. One captain recorded a message for Vaxan High Command. He said the humans had been toying with them. He reported that the human fleet's formation suggested they had been holding back significantly. He estimated they could have wiped out all 30 ships in under 10 minutes if they wanted. The fact that 5 were allowed to leave proved the humans were sending a message, not fighting a war. The footage spread through galactic networks within hours of the battle. Every spacefaring civilization watched the recordings with growing unease. The Battle of New Haven became required viewing in military academies across dozens of worlds. Analysts studied the human tactics frame by frame. Strategists rewrote their assessments of Earth's capabilities. Diplomats scrambled to adjust their policies toward humanity. The galaxy was being forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had badly underestimated the newest species to join their community. On Vaxan Prime, the Imperial Palace descended into chaos. Empress Calcin convened her war council within hours of receiving reports from the surviving ships. She was a formidable ruler who had consolidated power through both political skill and military success. Her scales were deep purple, marking her as royalty among the Vaxan people. Her yellow eyes blazed with rage as she listened to the captain's testimony. The officer described the human fleet's arrival and the systematic destruction that followed. He spoke of weapons that ignored shields and cyber attacks that crippled ships without physical damage. The military commanders demanded immediate retaliation. General Vexilon pounded the table with his clawed fist and declared that Vaxan honor required response. He spoke of mobilizing the full Imperial fleet, of striking at Earth itself. Other officers joined his call, their voices rising in a chorus of outrage. The Empire had not suffered such a defeat in over 3 centuries. They could not appear weak before the other galactic powers. Empress Calcin raised one hand and silence fell. She turned to her intelligence minister and asked for a complete assessment. The minister was an older Vaxan named Sectar, who had served 3 emperors before her. He pulled up holographic displays showing Earth's military infrastructure. The data painted a sobering picture. Orbital shipyards around Earth and its colonies were massive, larger than Vaxan facilities despite humanity's shorter time in space. Production rates suggested humans built ships at 3 times the Vaxan pace. The fleet that destroyed their border force represented only 12% of Earth's total military capacity. Sectar continued with worse news. Human technology appeared more advanced in several key areas. Their artificial intelligence systems were decades ahead of Vaxan computer science. Their materials engineering produced armor and weapons that outperformed anything the Empire possessed. Most troubling, the humans had clearly been developing military technology long before achieving space travel. They had not followed the usual pattern of peaceful exploration, followed by gradual militarization. They built weapons first and explored second. The Empress listened to the full briefing before speaking. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. She asked her generals a simple question. If they mobilized the full fleet and attacked Earth, what would the outcome be? The silence that followed answered her question. General Vexillon finally admitted that victory was uncertain at best. The humans had shown tactical superiority and technological advantages. A full war might destroy both civilizations. The Vaxan Empire would survive, but it would be crippled for generations. Back on Harmony Prime Station, the Galactic Council continued its emergency sessions. Multiple species demanded investigations into human military buildup. Others argued that the Vaxans had provoked the conflict and deserved their defeat. The debates grew heated as ancient political alliances fractured under the pressure of changing power dynamics. Ambassador Kreliex sat quietly through most sessions, his earlier arrogance completely gone. He had become a symbol of the danger in underestimating others. Daniel Brooks found himself at the center of intense diplomatic attention. Ambassador Prylox of the peaceful Diluvian Concord requested a private meeting. Her species were small and fragile, standing only 4 feet tall with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. They had achieved space travel through scientific excellence rather than military power. They survived by forming alliances with stronger species. Prylox spoke softly, admitting that humans terrified her people. She asked Daniel to help her understand how a species became so efficient at destruction. Daniel considered his answer carefully. He explained Earth's history without glorifying it. He described thousands of years of tribal warfare, of empires rising and falling, of technological advancement driven by military necessity. He talked about the world wars that killed tens of millions. He mentioned nuclear weapons developed when humans still lacked computers. He explained how humanity nearly destroyed itself multiple times before finally unifying under a single government. The unification came not from peace, but from exhaustion, from the realization that continued conflict meant extinction. Prylox listened with her large eyes focused on his face. She asked the question that haunted many species. How does a predator species control its violent nature? Daniel's answer was honest. Humans did not stop being violent. They channeled that violence into protecting rather than conquering. They learned to see all of humanity as their tribe, their pack. External threats unified them instantly because the instinct to defend their people was stronger than internal divisions. The Vaxans had triggered that instinct by killing civilians. On Earth, political debates raged in the global parliament chambers. Senator Greg Morrison led a faction arguing that humanity had revealed too much of their capabilities too quickly. He stood before the assembly speaking passionately about the value of being underestimated. He pointed out that now every species would either fear humans or view them as threats to be neutralized. The element of surprise was gone. Future conflicts would be against enemies who came prepared for human tactics. Admiral Stone addressed the Parliament in response. He was not a politician, but his words carried weight earned through decades of service. He explained that the demonstration at New Haven was necessary and calculated. Better for the galaxy to fear human capabilities than to constantly test them. The Vaxans attacked because they thought humans were weak. Now every potential aggressor would think twice. The cost of 47 civilian deaths was terrible, but escalation could have killed millions. Showing overwhelming force early might prevent the larger war. The vote came down narrowly in favor of the military's approach. Earth would maintain its current posture, neither apologizing for the response nor seeking further conflict. They would wait to see how the Vaxan Empire reacted. Dr. Amy Walsh made a discovery that changed the narrative significantly. While treating wounded colonists from New Haven, she reviewed data recovered from the destroyed mining station. The station's sensors had been monitoring unusual activity for weeks before the attack. She found evidence of Vaxan surveillance equipment placed in the area over a month earlier. Communication logs showed Vaxan ships making regular visits to the buffer zone. The military exercise claim was clearly false. The Vaxans had been planning this operation for a long time. Daniel presented this evidence to the Galactic Council in a formal session. He displayed the surveillance data and communication intercepts. He showed how Vaxan ships had been positioning for invasion while claiming peaceful intentions. The attack on the mining station was not a warning shot gone wrong. It was deliberate targeting of civilians to spread terror. The narrative shifted dramatically. What had appeared to some as human overreaction now looked like justified response to premeditated aggression. High Chancellor Vorn called for a formal inquiry into Vaxan actions. For the first time in over 1,000 years, a major galactic empire faced accountability for aggression against a smaller power. The precedent was significant. Larger species had always operated with implicit freedom to bully weaker ones. The Council's rules theoretically protected all members equally, but enforcement had always been selective. Human military power was forcing the Council to actually uphold its own principles. The most significant consequence developed quietly over the following weeks. Small species who had suffered under larger empires for centuries began reaching out to Earth through unofficial channels. The Diluvian Concord sent trade delegation proposals. The Rix Combine requested military advisors. 3 other species inquired about mutual defense agreements. None of them asked directly for protection, but the implications were clear. Humanity had proven they would defend their people with overwhelming force. That made Earth an attractive potential ally for anyone facing stronger neighbors. The Vaxan Empire found itself increasingly isolated. Species who had maintained friendly relations began distancing themselves. Trade agreements came up for renegotiation with less favorable terms. The economic impact started to hurt. Military allies quietly reviewed their commitments. No one wanted to be associated with the empire that had provoked humanity and lost so badly. Empress Calzin watched her empire's position deteriorate day by day. She consulted with advisors and read intelligence reports. The pattern was clear. The Vaxan Empire was becoming a pariah state. They could try to fight their way back to prominence, but that meant war with multiple fronts. Or they could accept the new reality and seek peace. The choice felt like surrender, but the alternative was potential destruction. She made the decision that would define her reign. She composed a formal request to Earth's government asking for direct negotiations. No intermediaries, no council oversight. A meeting between Vaxan and human leadership to establish peace terms. Her military commanders protested that it made them look weak. She pointed out that they were weak, at least compared to humanity. Pretending otherwise would only make things worse. The request reached Geneva, where Earth's government leaders debated the response. Some argued for refusing, for making the Vaxans come to the Council. Others saw opportunity. Direct negotiations would establish Earth's position as a power capable of independent diplomacy rather than a junior species needing council oversight. Admiral Stone's recommendation was simple. Negotiate from strength. Make clear this was not a treaty between equals. This was humanity dictating terms that would prevent future aggression. Fleet Admiral Carter received new orders from Earth's civilian government. Meet with Vaxan leadership. Establish terms. Ensure those terms made future conflict too costly to consider. Make the galaxy understand that humans were not conquerors, but they would accept nothing less than complete security for their people. The orders concluded with a reminder. 47 civilians died because the Vaxans thought humans were weak. The peace that followed needed to ensure no one made that mistake again. News of the upcoming negotiations spread through diplomatic channels. Species across the galaxy watched with intense interest. The outcome would establish precedents that shaped interstellar relations for decades. Humanity was only 40 years into space travel, but they were already reshaping the political landscape. Some observers called it remarkable, others called it terrifying. Daniel Brooks called it inevitable. A species that survived what humans survived did not stay weak for long. Empress Calzin's shuttle approached Earth with an escort of 3 Vaxan diplomatic vessels. Captain Paul Wright commanded the human squadron assigned to meet them. The UES Defiant led 5 other ships in a formation that was technically an honor guard, but everyone understood the implicit message. These were the same vessels that had destroyed the Vaxan border fleet. The escort was both courtesy and reminder. Paul opened communications and welcomed the Empress with formal protocol. His voice carried no warmth, but no hostility either. Professional distance was the tone. During the flight toward Earth, Cal Sin sat in her private quarters studying reports on human military development. She asked Paul for a direct conversation without diplomatic filters. He agreed, and his face appeared on her personal screen. She posed the question that had haunted her since receiving the battle reports. How did humanity develop such advanced military capability so quickly after achieving interstellar travel? Paul's response was delivered with the same flat professionalism. Humans did not develop these capabilities quickly. They possessed them before leaving their solar system. Every weapon system Earth deployed in space was an adaptation of technology created for planetary warfare. Railguns were centuries old. Nuclear weapons were older. Artificial intelligence had been developing since the 21st century. Humanity simply miniaturized the technology, improved efficiency, and mounted it on starships. Cal Sin felt something cold settle in her stomach. She asked how long humans had possessed weapons capable of planetary destruction. Paul checked his historical database before answering. Since 1945, over 400 years ago. The Vaxan Empress tried to process that timeline. Humans had the ability to destroy their own world for 4 centuries before they achieved faster-than-light travel. They lived with that capability hanging over them for generations. The psychological impact must have been enormous. Paul confirmed her thoughts. Growing up with extinction as a constant possibility shaped human thinking in fundamental ways. It taught them to take threats seriously and to respond with overwhelming force. The shuttle entered Earth's atmosphere and descended toward Geneva. Cal Sin looked through the viewport at the planet below. She saw cities sprawling across continents, massive structures reaching toward the sky, orbital installations visible as bright points against the darkness of space. This was the death world Daniel Brooks had described, the planet where everything evolved to kill or survive being killed. Humanity's home looked beautiful from orbit, but she understood now that beauty was deceptive. The peace negotiations took place in the same building where Earth's unified government had been founded after their last world war. The symbolism was deliberate, and Cal Sin recognized it. She entered the conference room accompanied by her diplomatic staff. Fleet Admiral Carter and Admiral Stone represented Earth's military. Senator Morrison represented civilian government. Daniel Brooks attended as the liaison who had warned them this would happen. The terms were presented without preamble. Fleet Admiral Carter outlined each point with clinical precision. The Vaxan Empire would withdraw from all disputed territories immediately. They would pay reparations to New Haven Colony totaling 50 billion credits over 10 years. They would submit to monitoring of their military fleet composition by neutral council observers. They would sign a binding non-aggression pact with all Galactic Council members. Finally, Vaxan ships were forbidden from entering human space for 50 years. Any violation would be treated as an act of war. Empress Cal Sin listened to each term and felt the weight of defeat. She protested that the terms were humiliating for her empire. Senator Morrison's response was direct and uncompromising. The Vaxans murdered 47 civilians and started a war they could not win. They were fortunate Earth was offering terms at all, rather than dismantling their empire piece by piece. He advised her to accept these conditions, or Earth would impose harsher ones. The choice was hers, but she needed to decide quickly. The Empress looked at Daniel Brooks, who had remained silent throughout the negotiation. She asked for a private word with him. The others left the room, and she faced the human who had tried to warn her ambassador. She posed the question that burned in her mind. Why did humans not warn more explicitly? Why speak in vague terms about not wanting Earth's attention? Daniel's answer revealed the tragedy underlying everything. Humans did warn explicitly, multiple times, but the Vaxons were so certain of their superiority that they could not conceive of a primitive species being a genuine threat. That was not a failure of communication. That was a failure of imagination on the Vaxon side. Calcin absorbed his words and recognized the truth in them. Her people had looked at humanity and seen only 40 years of space travel. They had dismissed thousands of years of violent history as irrelevant to modern warfare. They had assumed technological advancement followed a standard pattern. They had been wrong about all of it. She signed the treaty without further protest. The alternative was watching her empire collapse under economic isolation and potential military action. The treaty ratification ceremony took place at the Galactic Council station. High Chancellor Vorn presided over the formal proceedings. Every member species sent representatives to witness the historic moment. The chamber was filled to capacity. Daniel took his place in the human section, now officially appointed as Earth's first full ambassador to the Council. His promotion reflected humanity's elevated status in galactic politics. Vorn delivered a speech that would be studied in diplomatic academies for generations. He spoke about the danger of assumptions and the importance of respecting all species, regardless of how long they had traveled the stars. He reminded the Council that advancement was not measured solely by age, but by what challenges a species had overcome. Humanity emerged from a crucible that would have destroyed most civilizations. They carried that strength with them. Every species needed to respect it or face the consequences the Vaxons encountered. Ambassador Prelox approached Daniel after the ceremony with unexpected news. The Diluvian Concord wished to establish formal diplomatic and trade relations with Earth. Within the following week, 12 other species made similar requests. Small civilizations that had existed in the shadow of larger empires suddenly saw an opportunity. Humanity had proven they would defend their people with devastating efficiency. That made Earth an attractive potential ally for anyone facing stronger neighbors. On New Haven Colony, Governor Helen Price oversaw the reconstruction efforts. The memorial to the 47 killed colonists was completed 3 months after the battle. It stood in the central plaza, a simple structure of black stone, with each name carved in precise letters. The dedication ceremony drew thousands of colonists. Helen spoke briefly about the cost of peace and the importance of remembering those who died. Dr. Amy Walsh attended and added her own thoughts. The memorial would serve as a reminder that human strength came with responsibility to protect those who could not protect themselves. Captain Paul Wright received promotion to Fleet Admiral and command of Earth's first deep space exploration fleet. His mission was to explore beyond known galactic space, seeking new worlds and potentially new civilizations. The orders came with an interesting directive. Earth wanted exploration to continue, but now every species they encountered would already know about humanity. The fear in alien eyes would be tempered by respect. Paul accepted the responsibility of representing humanity to the unknown galaxy. He understood that first contact scenarios had changed. Humans would never again be underestimated. Fleet Admiral Carter addressed the combined Earth Defense Forces in a speech broadcast across all human space. He stood at attention in his dress uniform and spoke about the Battle of New Haven. He reminded them that humanity had not wanted the conflict. They tried to avoid it through diplomatic warnings, but when forced to fight, they fought with all the skill and determination that only humans possessed. The galaxy now understood that Earth stood as a shield for their people. Future aggressors would think carefully before threatening human colonies. Friends of humanity would know that Earth's protection was absolute. Daniel Brooks gave his first official address to the Galactic Council as Earth's ambassador. He stood at the human podium wearing the diplomatic corps uniform with new insignia reflecting his rank. He spoke about the warning he had delivered to Ambassador Krelix months earlier. He expressed regret that the warning had not been heeded. He noted that war was a terrible teacher, but its lessons lasted. Humanity learned centuries ago that peace was precious and worth defending. They hoped the rest of the galaxy could learn that lesson without paying the same terrible cost humans had paid during their own history. The council session concluded with formal votes acknowledging Earth's position as a major galactic power. Humanity held no territory beyond their colonies. They commanded no empire. But they possessed military capability that rivaled civilizations 10 times older. Their willingness to use that capability when provoked had been demonstrated. The balance of galactic power had shifted. Ambassador Krelix requested a private meeting with Daniel before leaving the station permanently. The Vaxxon ambassador was being recalled to his homeworld, his career effectively ended by his miscalculation. He wanted to understand one thing. If humans knew the Vaxxons were underestimating them, why did they not simply demonstrate their power earlier? Why allow the situation to escalate to violence? Daniel's answer was simple. Humans preferred being underestimated. It provided strategic advantage. But more importantly, Earth genuinely wanted peace. They hoped diplomatic warnings would be sufficient. The tragedy was that pride prevented the Vaxxons from hearing those warnings until it was too late. 6 months after the Battle of New Haven, the first joint human-alien scientific expedition launched from Earth. Dr. Amy Walsh served as chief medical officer for the mission. The crew included humans and members of 5 other species working together to explore an ancient derelict vessel discovered at the edge of known space. The cooperation demonstrated that humanity was more than warriors. They were also scientists, explorers, and builders. The galaxy settled into a new equilibrium. The Vaxxon Empire accepted its diminished status and focused on internal reforms. Smaller species formed a loose coalition with Earth providing unofficial protection through their reputation alone. The Galactic Council functioned with renewed attention to its founding principles. Large species no longer assumed they could bully smaller ones without consequence. Earth continued building ships and training forces, but also invested heavily in diplomatic and scientific endeavors. The lesson of their own history guided policy. Strength alone was not enough. Humanity needed to be strong enough to deter aggression, but restrained enough to avoid becoming the threat they defended against. The final image was of Earth viewed from orbit. Ships moved in synchronized patterns around the planet, a mix of military vessels and exploration craft. A new medical ship was launching, heading toward a distant system where plague had devastated an alien population. Earth was sending help because that was what strong species did. They protected the weak and healed the injured. A transmission went out from Earth's diplomatic corps to all member species of the Galactic Council. The message was simple, but carried weight earned through demonstrated capability. Humanity sought peaceful relations with all civilizations. They offered friendship to those who valued cooperation. They promised devastating response to those who threatened innocence. The choice belonged to each species. Earth would react accordingly. Daniel Brooks recorded a personal log entry in his quarters on Harmony Prime Station. He reflected on the journey from his first warning to the current state of galactic affairs. He noted that humans had tried to avoid revealing their full capabilities. The Vaxxons forced that revelation through their aggression. Now the galaxy knew what humanity could do when pushed. The hope was that knowledge would prevent future conflicts. Time would tell if the lesson lasted or if another species would eventually need to learn the hard way. He concluded his entry with the words that had defined everything. You do not want Earth's attention. But if you earn humanity's friendship, you will never need to fear again. That was the message Earth offered the galaxy. Peace through strength and friendship through loyalty. Humanity had proven they excelled at both.